Today, we are going to use everything we learned about authentication authorization using Keycloak in C#, in the C# project. Well, Node.js developers, don't worry, next video will be about you, but you can go on and then watch this one, you will not lose anything. The concept is the same, but if you are really into Node.js and want to just learn it with Node.js, then you have to wait for the next video. In this video, we are going to check on an existing project. I have created a project which is a university environment as we had in our examples, and you have to map it to your own project, right? So you're probably using a role-based authorization where there is an access token and then there are roles inside that access token, and then you do authorization on your backend based on the roles, and then check some IDs like the user ID to your records if this is the creator, and then you give access and so on. We are going to have a similar environment, almost similar, and then we are going to see how can now have fine-grained authorization instead of this old authorization. Like this old one is not wrong, and it works very well with small applications, but when the model gets complicated, you may need to look somewhere else. Perhaps you can make it simpler. I also have a surprise for the C# developers, for the .NET developers. I have created a library, and it will help you to do fine-grained authorization with Keycloak. The link to the authentication, the authorization video is also available in the description. And with all that being said, let's start. Okay, so first let me walk you through the project. So it is a very simple project, it's a normal .NET project where I'm using a mediator to separate my commands and queries, which is like a common practice in C# with .NET. I have some controllers, I have some commands here from my mediator, based on my mediator, and I have some entities. It's worth to say that these entities are very simplified. The relation between them matters a lot because we are going to implement policies in Keycloak based on these relations. And we are going to see how can we handle a very complicated case at the end. Yeah, but that's all about it in this project. The link for this project is going to be available in the description. You can go on, clone it, and then play around with it. In the version that I'm sharing, I only explain the creations, but you can now go on and then play around with update, delete, and so on. I'm also going to export the Keycloak configuration that we are going to get at the end of this video. Now let's see how were we handling authentication and authorization the old way, or like not really the old way, you still can use it, but with normal native .NET. So I am assuming that you are familiar with C# already. So basically in C# after .NET 6 in program CS, like before that there was a startup CS, but now there's only the program CS. This is where you configure your container, like the container services. You have a dependency injection container here, and then you will configure the services inside these containers. And here I am configuring authentication services, which comes natively with .NET. And as you see here, I am adding the authentication services, and here I am telling the authentication services how you should handle authentication. And it is handling it with JSON Web Key Set, which is JWKS endpoint, and it I guess all of the identity providers provide this, and Keycloak is not an exception. It also has that endpoint, and the endpoint is like this. I already showed it in the authentication video. You can go check that video out. So this is basically how it handles authentication. Now, when does it know that it has to use this service? It comes inside the middleware. So before it hits the controller, so let's say that this is the app build. When you run the application, it once goes through here, and for example here, as you see, map controllers here means that it will map all of your controllers based on this route, based on this API controller into endpoints. That's how you can see it in the Swagger. And then when the request comes in, again, it will go through these middlewares once again. And when it is going through these middlewares, it first goes through the authentication, as you see, and then inside this authentication, it checks if there is an access token inside the request, then just verify it using the verify it and put it into the HTTP context user claims based on the configuration I had here, and then also use the authorization middleware. So if I do this, it doesn't work. So this authorization middleware needs the token already to be decoded and verified. And then I will have the then it goes through the map controllers, then it goes through the endpoints and everything that has to run and is protected. So it matters that here the order is important, but here inside the services the order doesn't matter unless you have some very special cases that you are dependent on another service to be configured first, and then you do the configuration, which really rarely happens. And if you have that, I would say it's a very bad practice. But anyways, yeah, so this is basically how it works. And now how does it know? I'm going to show you. How does it know that, for example, when it has to then perform the authorization? Because now you will think, oh, now everything that goes to the application has to be authorized and has to have an access token. And what if I have like a registration endpoint and that doesn't need authentication or authorization? Well, we are going to see. Let's actually now go on and then check how the endpoints look like. So these are the endpoints which are built based on the map controllers that you saw, and yeah, so these are like normal endpoints, and we are going to now run one of them. So let's go on to Postman. I don't want to do it here because I rather to have it here. Let's go on and create Mary. So in our examples, Mary was the manager last time. She doesn't exist in our database as an employee. We are going to create her and see what will happen. So as you see, despite that I had the authentication authorization middlewares in place, I still can get to the endpoint and execute it. Why does that happen? Because this endpoint is not protected. So how this works is that it needs this authorized attribute. So if I come back to this employee, I have to set this authorized attribute. Well, this part of the video is very basic about authorization authentication in .NET. Like, I'm not going that deep into it. I'm just going to show it, and then we are going to do a transition to the fine-grained authorization because the focus is not really this part. I'm just going to give you the idea of like how it was before and how are we going to have it later. So when you add just authorize, it's important to know that then it checks only that the token which is passed is valid, and it doesn't check anything else. It doesn't care about the token information. It just cares, I mean, one information on token it cares about, like multiple, like depends on your authentication configuration. It cares about the expiration, and it cares about a valid issuer and a valid audience. That's all it cares about, and then you're protected. So now let's see what will happen if I run and execute our endpoint again. Now if I execute, I'm going to, yeah, we have it later, it's fine. So I'm getting a 401. Now to go through, you should issue a token. So let me go on and reissue this because I think that was a little bit old. So let's issue a new token, copy this, come back here, token. I'm going to create someone new. I'm going to create Mark as an employee, and now I have added this already. Now it works. Yeah, because the token is there, it's a valid token, and it goes through. Now, what if that I only, so right now, let's actually check how Mary is. If I come here to the token again, and then go to as you see, there are some roles. but she's not a manager. And I want a manager be able to create a new employee only. How would I do that in like natively in .NET? That would be adding this property and say person has to be a manager. So now, and this is a comma, so as you see, it has the documentation. You have to separate it by comma. If you have more, then you will just do it like this. I guess you already see what the problem is, right? So in the old RBAC method in .NET, you will have an issue that this role called manager exists in this service. But what if you don't really have manager role, and then your roles are coming actually from another identity provider, and you have to of course map them to your own roles. But if you want to change a role because some policies are changed and so on, and this role is used, like let's say maybe it is admin, or maybe it is I don't know, a system manager or something, like you probably have other roles like this as well, and then you have to go on through all of your microservices and then change this, and this is not really maintainable and not scalable. So in one service it's fine, but if you want to scale it to another service, then you have a problem. But now let's go on and see what will happen if I run this. Before, when I ran the create employee with my token, it worked. But now if I run it again, it says, oh, 403. Now it says not 401. I'm still authenticated, but it is forbidden for me to access it because I don't have the needed role to access this. Now let's go on and add the role, because there is also a point here about Keycloak and .NET role synchronization. Let me go on and then say that I have the manager real role already here. I'm going to go to role mappings, find my role here under the real roles and assign it to Mary. And if I come back here and as you see, even though that I have assigned the manager role to Mary, I have to create a token again to have this take effect, because this token is a standalone, right? So this token works standalone just by itself. So therefore it doesn't know about my changes. Now if I go back to JWT.io, I don't know why I closed the last one. Now if I go here, I see manager under realm access. Now let's see what will happen. It's already copied, come back here. Nothing still. Why, I wonder. So let's go back into our program here and then go under the authentication. Okay. So this map inbound claims. What does it do? First of all, this is always true by default. What happens is that it will map the Keycloak claims. It will detect them, and then it will map them into Microsoft's predefined claims. Microsoft has its own keys. So now the Keycloak roles for the claim. So as you saw in Keycloak, it has realm access, it has roles, it has manager, and so on. It doesn't work this way. So it cannot understand which one is the role. So what you need to do is in Keycloak, you have to go on and then add a mapper. So if I go back to Keycloak under the university, if I go under the client, this is the UI client I'm using. If I go under the client scope, I'm always getting the role information. So let me show everything here. I always come and call it. So here you need to, let me slow down a little bit. If you go under the mappers, add mapper, and then you have to do by configuration. And then here you will select the real user real roles. And this will be this one. And I always call it just .NET roles because I have special roles. There is no prefix, it is multi-valued, and the token claim name. So this is the claim name, the key that we want to it to appear inside our JWT token. So it should be role, and it has to be role if so if it is role, then .NET knows that it has to map it to something. So now it is role, and then it is string. It's going to be passed as a string, and it has to be passed to the access token, as you see there. So now let's go on and get the token again. As you see, even when I issue the token is larger immediately. So let's go on and check this out here. Let's go and see. Oh, now I have this one. Okay, another problem that immediately appears is that based on the application that you're using, you have to add special mappers so that the application works. Of course, you could ignore this. Of course, that could be possible. And then you could come here and say this is set to false. And then if you set this to false while you are doing the mapping, what will happen is that it will it won't map any of this to the .NET claims. It will just leave them as they are under the user claims, and then you then just need to go inside there and then take them yourself. So now you have some part of the identity server's definition also inside your code. So it is a mess. So as we are going, I'm describing you why it's better to migrate into the fine-grained authorization with Keycloak. So now let's go on and then run the endpoint again with the new token. So this is our new token. Let me edit here. Oh, I created mark again, I guess. Yeah, doesn't matter. We have two mark though. It happens. Yeah, so as you see, it worked. So now Mary is the manager, and she can create employees. Now what will happen is, I mean, in this case, it's simple, right? So creating manager, or creating employee is a role. It's done by manager, and editing is done by manager. Doesn't matter how many managers, like all of the managers can do it. But what if you mean a manager of a specific faculty? What if you mean that, for example, let me make another example. Let's come here and say, also, by the way, this authorize does also work directly here. So if you do this, then this means that you expect authorization only on this endpoint. So if you have another thing coming here, then that can be anonymous. Or if you have the authorization on the whole thing, you can still come and say hello anonymous. That's also possible. But now under the faculty, so like actually let me make a better example. Under enrollments, so when you're creating an enrollment, you have to connect to the course and to a student. But let's say a manager can do that, but a manager of a specific faculty can do this, or a professor of a specific course can take care of this. Well, in the older time, I'm not going to implement it right now, but in the older time, what you would have done is that you just let the manager go in. So you probably would think, okay, I'm gonna just let the manager go in. This is the wrong authorization attribute. It's this one. Yeah, so I will say I let the manager go in, and then inside here I say, okay, now since the manager is in, I'm going to take his user ID. So I'm probably going to say HTTP context accessor, give me the HTTP context accessor, and then from the HTTP context accessor you can access the HTTP context, then the user, and then you can access the identity. I mean, not the identity here. I'm probably gonna go and then search for the first. Here you're probably gonna get the sub and then get the user ID. And then now based on the user ID, I'm gonna search for the employee which has the user ID, get the employee, and then check if the employee is in the same faculty, like the managers, if the same faculty as the student is or as the course is, and things like that. It's a lot of logic that you have to implement into your code and then do unit testing and so on. What now we are going to do is, of course, you are going to need some syncing on the other one too, but the logic is simpler because I would rather to sync some of my data. Let's say I would rather to sync this enrollment entity as a resource in my identity provider then, and you of course can also do this asynchronously. You don't even need to maybe implement it here. We are going to implement it here for this video, but I'm going to show you how simple it is to implement it here. It's going to be much simpler than implementing all of those checks, because those checks is also not always only checking that you are in the same that you are in the faculty of the manager and you are creating an enrollment for that faculty. It's going to be even much more complicated. For example, you want to see a grade and then the grade is owned by a professor, then you have to be in the same faculty as the professor that who has created the grade, and things like that. So it even can go further. Like let's say that your faculty belongs to a university and this university is an international university, has branches all over the country and all over the globe, and then now there are managers over managers, and now you have to handle all of these every time a new feature like this new hierarchies are added. Now you have to add it to your code. It doesn't sound smart, like, to be honest. So now let's go on and then check how should we do it in Keycloak, but from scratch. We are going to implement everything from scratch. Okay, so now what is the plan? We are now going to actually do what we did with the native .NET, but in a new way, like in a different aspect. First, we are going to exactly have that, and then we are going to see how can we add more and then do more with Keycloak fine-grained authorization. As you see, this is the same project. I just have splitted this part, this into domain and service, because inside the domain we are going to have some repositories. I'm gonna show you why, but first let's go on and add our surprise. So the surprise that I had for you is this package. This is Keycloak auth.net, which I have created. It's going to ace working with the fine-grained authorization in Keycloak. So let's go on and install both of these. This one you also need for later in this video. This is going to help you to synchronize resources from your service to Keycloak. So I'm going to configure both right now, but mainly in this section we are going to only use this one. So let's go on and install this. So let's add this here. This one too. Okay, now our domain has the two new packages. Let's go on and then configure it here. So let me open a program CS. Here what you need is, first of all, the add authentication. Now you only need it if you want to verify the token, not verify by the meaning of like if it is valid, because this authorization package that we just added does the authorization by itself, because it sends the access token to Keycloak to check for the permission. And if the access token doesn't have is not like valid anymore, then it's going to reject it. So then you will know that you're not authorized. You can keep this so your token gets decoded, and then you can use the claims in your service. But for now, let's go on and add the Keycloak. Change it to auth. and now we are going to need to configure this. And for the configuration, now you have to so now you have to give a section from your app settings. So also, if you check the documentation from the library here, you can check like inside the quick start that like you can just build it like this. Let me actually go on and take this from here, and mine is going to be auth the section. So now it's going to build the section, like take the section from your app settings. It doesn't exist right now. We are going to add this, and there are certain configurations you need to add. Base URL realm and auth audience. So these are everything that I need for now. We are going to add more soon. So this is basically your base URL without the realm. You add the realm separately, and in our case it's university, and the auth audience. So anyone who has watched the previous video, the auth audience is your authorization server. It's like a client ID which you have made it like to act like an authorization owner of your Keycloak instance. So we have to actually go on and then create this. So let's come here to university, and inside the clients, we are going to create a new client. Let's call this auth, the same name as there. You have to have the authentication on, so the authorization is on, and go on, next, and save. So now everything is set up here for you. Yeah, so that's all for the configuration. There is one other thing. If you want to go on and then use this package with the endpoints, if you are using endpoints like this, for example, and then let's say you have so you have an endpoint that does hello world. If you are going to use require auth, this is the same as require authorization, but the require auth comes with the Keycloak authorization package that we just added. Then you need to use a middleware. So you need to use Keycloak auth. If you don't have this, then this middleware is not needed. So you can just ignore that if it is not there. Because if you use the attributes, as we are going to do now, then you are going to so the attributes are going to be handled differently. Now let me go on and then go to the employees. So before we checked like only the manager can create an employee or about the faculty too. Now, so this is like a top entity in our model right now, because like the employees or the faculties are like they don't exist, then someone has to onboard them. So in our case, they're going to be a super user. But if you have a university also and locations for this university, and then those managers of those university are going to be the only ones who can onboard new faculties, for example, under their university. So, but now I don't have that, so I'm just going to say, but the point is here, right? So here I don't need to mention that I need the manager or a super user to do this. I just say, I just want to create a faculty. That's all I want. And this, like here, sorry, here it's employee. I want to just create an employee. Now, who can do this is going to be configured in Keycloak. So this way, your service really doesn't know about the role information. So this is the point that may change a lot, right? So the access control can change a lot based on the user's actions, user's creation, revoke permissions, and so on. So we are going to move the the part that changes a lot out of our code and put it somewhere else so that we don't really need to change the code that much. Now let me go on and then configure stuff. So first, let's actually make a call, right? So let me go on and make a call here, see what will happen, because right now we have not really configured anything. Postman again. Get an access token. So this is where we were creating Mark, and now let's go on and put the access token here and see what will happen now. So I get a 401, and then why do I get a 401? Because it says one of the given scopes, like create, is invalid. So like first of all, create a scope doesn't exist in this authorization server because we don't have any scopes. So this means also Keycloak that first checks the scope if and then from the scope checks the resource, and then from the combination checks if the permission exists for them. Yeah, so but now let's go on then create the scope. So let me go on here and under here. So yeah, we are going to need create here. And now let's see what will happen now. So if I do another send here, as you see, now it says the resource with ID employee doesn't exist. Now let's go on and create employee. If I go here now, let's go on and create an employee. Don't need anything else really here. The scope is create, and that's it. And now let's see now what will happen. So it says it's not authorized. Why does it say that? Because, well, I don't have any permission for this. So if I go under permissions, there is no permission that is going to decide if this resource is accessible. Well, you can change that if you are going to say if the permission doesn't exist, still let them go. You can change the settings to permissive, and this means that if the permission didn't exist, then the request still has to go on. So now, as you see, it ran successfully and everything is fine. Now, the other point that you see, I did all of this without touching the code, right? So I just wanted to see employee create, and now I can configure how the decision should be made. Let's put it back to enforcing and then come to policies. Here we are going to say the super user can access. So let me go on and create the only super user, add roles. So I already have the role here. So it's a real role for me. And let me also show something cool here. Let me go on under Mary because I think I already have assigned this. Let's remove it. And let me go on and say, let's get the token again. So I want to show something here, which is also cool because with the native .NET, we didn't have this. As you saw, if the role was changed, we always had to go on and if the role was changed, we always had to go on and reissue the token. So because the token is a standalone. So if I go under JWT.io, I will not find the super user anyway. But one thing, this also you don't need anymore. So you can just simply get rid of this now because this is, yeah, so .NET related. Let's just get rid of it. And yeah, so then let's test now with the new config. One thing that I forgot right now to do is that under auth z, now we have the policy with only super user. Now we have to also create a permission. So I'm going to add create employee, and then I'm going to also say create employee can do the creation, and the policy is only super user. So only super user can do this. So we are kind of doing a role-based access control here. So if I now go on and then copy this here and see what will happen. Again, it says 401 because the token doesn't have the role, right? But now I don't need to issue it again. So I can just come here and say fetch the token, fetch the roles. And then now if I run this, oh, it still says 401. Let me see why. it still says not authorized. So let's go on and see what's the problem. So we have the resources, then employee, then we have the create under the permissions. Here we have selected this employee, and then the authorization scopes are there. Everything here looks just fine. Yeah, that's true, because yeah, as you saw, we have actually unassigned a role. So still, without touching the token, I can just go on and assign the role, and then just run this again, and everything works fine. And if you want to revoke the role again from this user, then just go on and then remove this, and immediately he or she cannot execute the action anymore. Yeah, so as you see, you're not really touching the code, and you can just do whatever is needed to be done. Let's actually now do another trick to make our permissions a little bit nicer. I am going to add this also to faculties. So under faculty, I'm going to say auth z and faculty create. And now the faculty is also protected. But when I am coming here, maybe I don't want to create a permission for these common, for this. So for everything that the super user can create, right? So in this case, I'm probably going to come here and say, okay, this is not create employee. This is domain type creation, for example, and then apply this on the domain type. So here I say apply it on domain type. Only super user can create domain types, and with the create scope. Now, if I go back here under the resources, I can come and say, okay, this is a domain. I would still rather to add the new resource because yeah, you need to add the name there, but you also can decide not to. You can also say, yeah, I just have a domain type, but I would separate it because it's better than not to, because later maybe you have a new policy and then you have to change stuff. So it's already separated, then you are more flexible. So let me go on and add faculty here, and yeah. So the type is also domain for this one, and it has the creation. And let me now go back. Yeah, that's it. I don't need to change anything else. Now let's go on and then see what will happen if I create a new faculty. So the name is science, for example, and then the manager ID is going to be, the manager ID is going to be important later, but let me create another mark. I have a lot of marks, I guess, right now in the database. So let's go on and then put the manager here and send a request. As you see, it's also created right now immediately because I just made this work like this. So if I simply come here and then perhaps even remove this, so the creation cannot be permitted, then it should not really work. Let's check. So the problem was that I have not reran the service. So I didn't know that a faculty create permission has been added on top of the create. So now if I come here and then remove the create from here and then just, no, this is the token, just run this, then I get 401, and then it says, yeah, so it cannot really find the faculty because it's searching from the create to find the faculties. First, look into create and see if faculty is under it. Since I have removed it from there, so then it cannot really find the faculty, even though it exists. If I set it back and then now run this again, I will get my answer. Yeah, so that's it with how we can do role-based access control. This will work most of the time for you, and as you see, it will actually make it easier now because you don't need to put these roles inside your application. But now let's go on and see what else you can do. So what other things you can do with this, and we are going to see how we can synchronize between Keycloak and your service. Okay, so let's see what do we want to do now to enhance our authorization. I want a course to be only be created by the manager of a faculty or by the super user. So how can I know the manager? Who is the manager? You have attributes, right? So in the resources in Keycloak, you have certain attributes, and then you can set these attributes, and then you can check these attributes inside the policies using JavaScript. So yeah, so these are the attributes. They're simply key value pairs where the value is an array of strings. To do that now, I have to add an attribute when I'm creating the faculty, and I also have to add the faculty to the Keycloak. So for that, I'm going to use a simple repository pattern. I have already set the faculties to internal. I want to hide the dbset layers that I'm handling separately in the domain from the service logic, because maybe the developers are different and I don't want them to access these directly, because I want a controlled access over them. That's why it's internal, and I'm going to expose it through a repository. So let's add the repositories, and here I'm going to have a faculty repository domain repositories. So faculty repository. So there are two things that you need here. So you need the application DB context, and you need the auth resources context. So let's see if we have the configuration for that. Let me go on here. So we added this add Keycloak auth here. We also have to add auth resources. But now we have to actually extend our app settings here. If I go back here, I need to add a client secret. So this client secret is going to be the secret of this client. But if you have another client which is responsible for handling your realm, then you need to add the ID of it separately here. But right now we don't have that, so we are going to just add the client secret for the auth client. Here, come here to the auth client under credentials, you will find this. Well, in Kubernetes, if you deploy through Kubernetes or any other environments, you probably have this inside your environment variables or inside the secret valve, and then you just serve it from there into the environment variables. But right now we are going to put it directly here, and with this everything now is configured. So let me come back here. So with the auth resources that we added to the services, now I can access this, and let's go on and then create a faculty. So this would be my input is a faculty, and now I'm going to first open a transaction. So I'm going to say, because I have to do two calls. One call is from this one to the database and this one to the Keycloak. Now if this one fails, which I'm going to call after the DB context call, I want the database transaction to roll back and doesn't save anything to have the consistent data. So let's go on and then say transaction DB context database begin transaction. And now yeah, so here simply say DB context faculties add the input. DB context is save changes. he will do. Now here I will say auth z that so I would call this resources or auth z resources. So auth z resources that create. Here I have to give it a type. So the type will be faculty. This type is what you are going to use on the left side. So plus its identifier. So if I add the identifier also as a string, so it should be input.id.toString. And now so there were some other stuffs we needed to add. So we need to add a scope, but what type of scope do we need here? In this case, I would rather not to have, I want to have a very specific scope here because I want to add a course to the faculty. And the course creation, I'm going to actually put under the, I can put it under the course endpoint, of course, but I can also put it under the faculty input. So the reason that I am going to put the scope for create course here is that when I am creating the course, well, no course exists yet to compare anything. So there should be a resource that I compare it to. You may ask that, okay, then compare it to a generic resource called course. But yeah, that's correct. But I want to also check if I can create it based on the faculty. So I have to check it with the faculty actions and not the, so I have to check if the faculty, if this faculty, for this faculty, I can create a course. So therefore the action of creating the course is under the faculty. So here I am going to go on under the scopes and I am going to, I'm under auth z, I'm going to authorization, scopes, I'm going to add create course. And this is a specific. So now I can come back here and here I can say, yeah, I have one and that's called create course. By the way, for example, you may also have update and you may also have delete and you may also have read. So you can just add all of them now here. So you can just add update, read, delete. So this means that for this faculty, I'm adding certain actions. I'm adding update. Can it be updated? This is the scope of the update. It's not the question of can it be, it's the question of what can be done to the faculty or through the faculty. I can update the faculty, I can read it, I can delete it, and I can create a course for it. So, or under it. Then what else do we need? We need the attributes. We said we want to add the manager ID as an attribute under it. So you can just simply add a new dictionary here where the key is going to be manager ID and the value is going to be, which is an array, is going to be your manager ID. So it's input.manager ID to string. And now, only now you will say transaction.commit. So now you see that I have just added the manager and so on. Of course, later you can come here and then change the manager. So if you have an endpoint that changes the manager, you change it in the database, and through the auth z resources, you can also get the faculty with the ID that we had here. And then you can go on and then change the attributes. So you can remove the attributes or you can just change the attributes. So you can just add new attributes, you can add new managers, or you can remove the existing ones and things like this. So yeah, for assignments or for removing resources or attributes, you have the options. You also have the options for adding scopes, adding URIs, and so on. By default, the URI which will be created here is going to be like this. So it's going to add this under the URI for this resource. Well, let's go on and then see now what will happen. So I'll just simply return input. And now this is here. I'm going to add perhaps a new dependency injection config here. Repositories, domain. Static service collection. Add repositories, and don't have an employee repository for now. I only have this one. I come back to my service here, say builder.services.add repositories, and now under faculty, under the command actually, so create faculty command, I am going to now use the faculty repository. So say faculty repository, call it repository, and now I'm going to say repository create the faculty. So what will happen this way basically is that if you have the domain, and then if you have, for example, an import or an internal service which is going to push something to your application, now that one will also create a resource in your application, so you don't need to synchronize separately. So the domain gonna be used in all of your other services around. So if you have another service which is going to also handle like faculties and so on, but internally not gonna be public, you can now have the same logic there without really implementing in each of these different services. And in your CI/CD, you do not need to create a package out of this unless you want to create a client for this service. But for all of this under the same repository, they can just reference each other, and the CI/CD pipeline can just find them and then test them, build them, and publish them. It's just something in the bracket to worth saying. Yeah, so now let's see what will happen. Now I want to create a faculty. This yet doesn't have anything to do with the courses, but when the faculty is created, the manager ID has to be available under the new created faculty. So let's go on and see what will happen. Go on and advance create a new access token. And I, as a super user, can do this right now, right? So I'm not the manager, I am the super user, and the super user now can create faculties. And the manager, we already have a manager. We are going to call the faculty engineering. And let's create and see what will happen here now. And error, yep. So one thing which is important to do, I forgot to mention this, is that the client that you are going to let manage your realm has to have appropriate roles for it. First of all, when you turn on this authorization, it automatically gonna check this for you, service account roles. Therefore, you are going to have this tab available here, and you have to add certain roles so you are able to manage your environment. So here I can just come and say add realm admin. So then this client, when a token is issued with this client, now this client can change stuff. Because right now this 403 is basically telling me that, yeah, the token which you created with this client, which for the server-to-server communication, cannot access the resources under the authorizations server to add new resources. So now let's see what will happen. As you see, it is now successful. And now if I come back to my authorization under the resources, I have the faculty now. And as you see, everything that we wanted is added. There is a manager ID, and here's the manager. But now let's go on and add the manager. So was Mark was the manager, and his mail is verified, let's say, and let's give him credentials. So one thing is that you probably should have a kind of a user management system around your services, like that user management with handling roles and like letting the user to create users, to change their password, to change the information, to assign roles, remove roles, and so on. So because you probably will not expose the whole Keycloak to your users, you're probably gonna do it through your own UI or create a theme for this for Keycloak and then limit it to certain actions. But now we don't have that. So I have to go on and then add a new attribute under this newly created user. Let me go and then add enable this. So under my realm, I have to enable unmanaged attributes. So therefore, here I can add new attributes. So I have to add a person ID. So when the user is created in Keycloak, you have multiple choices here. You either can say save the user ID from Keycloak under your person information in your database, or you can put the ID of the person in your database as an attribute in Keycloak. I would rather to do this one because then I am more flexible and my model really doesn't have information about these users. So like the database model is like important to keep clean and then it just do what it is asked to do. It doesn't have extra information that it doesn't need. So now it has the person ID and now I want to see if I can create a course. So what do I do here? Here I come and say create a new auth Z. And then I'm going to say one important thing that you just saw is that the format of the resource is created. As you see, the format is created like this, the type, colon, and then comes the ID. So here I also have to do the same. Well, as we said, we are going to add this perhaps under the faculty. So then it is a little bit more clear. So I'm going to say public async task. This is going to be a course, create course, and create course command, await mediator, and that's it. Now my path is HTTP post, but I have faculty ID and courses. So now if I, so now under authorization, here I have to say, okay, now I want to do create course for this faculty, like now where do I get the ID from? So here you can now add the ID. So this is now going to be the same as this, and by default it's going to take this from the route, but now we don't have it inside the route, so we are going to just add this. That would be our faculty ID, and I'm going to say from route. But now, since I am not really sending it from the body, of course I can send it from the body, but here, yeah, so it's better to now set it here. So instead of that, we have to come here and say request that faculty ID is this GUID that we just added. And let me see what is the problem here with this faculty. Yeah, so this is a mistake. It should not be like that. And the name cannot be set, it's already set, but the faculty ID can be set. And now, yeah, so everything right now is set. So what will happen is that now the auth Z attribute will automatically go on to the params and then take this. You also had the chance, if you don't want it to be here inside your params, you can just come here and then change this. So you can say the placeholder source. So the placeholder would be this faculty ID. And then you say the placeholder source is the placeholder source dot body, for example. By default, it is set to params, and then that's why it's going to search it from here. As you see, you can also check it from the headers, and you can also get it from the queries. But if you have multiple permissions here, you can set the placeholder source for all of them. If you want to have different placeholder source, then you have to have multiple auths here. So you can also do that. That's also possible. Yeah, so now let's see what will happen. Now, if I actually call this, it should fail. So let me, because I mean, we don't have any permission, and this one we also don't need anymore. I'm going to comment it out, and then let's run this again. And go on. I want to see the, oh, it's not graphical. So now we have this one. Let's go on and call it with the faculty ID that we just created here. So this will be the faculties, and comes the ID. And I guess here is also just a name. I'm gonna call it math. And let me go on. Yeah, just need the name math. The faculty ID there you don't need to add anymore because it's already added from here. And we don't have a token. Let's go and see what will happen now. So it's a 401, but it's probably because that, yeah, because I don't have a token on it, right? So let's go on and add the token. Let me add an old token. This is our old token. Let's just add it. Still 401. Well, here it says 403. Well, simply it really doesn't find the it finds the scope, it finds the resource, but it doesn't find any permissions. So as I mentioned before, I can now come back here to the settings, and if I turn this on, make it set it to primitive, I should be just fine. So I can just create a course. But if I don't, I have to now fix it for the permissions so that I can create a protected course. So let's go on and add the permission for this. So for the permission, what do we want? So the permission has to let the super user and the manager to create the course. So let's go on and add a new scope-based permission here first. Say create course, and the resource type is going to be faculty. Even though I'm creating a course, I would say create faculty course. I have to set the resource type to faculty because I'm creating a course for the faculty type. And I want to do the create course action. And one of my policies is super user. I'm gonna change this later. So save. Now the super user can do this. So I am the super user, and now I can do this. But now let's go on and issue a token for Mark. So if I issue the token for Mark, so I can't, and it's probably a 403. Yeah, so I'm not authorized. Yeah, because Mark, yeah, he's a manager. He's not a super user. I mean, he's not even a manager. So I have to go back, assign a role to him, and then call him the manager. So even if I have that, I don't even have a policy for managers. So let's go on and then add also a role manager policy. So only manager, or call it just manager role. Add roles realm. Manager can access this, fetch the roles, and save. Go back to policies. Well, now it will work, right? So if I go back to my course creation, I also add the manager role. and set this to this one. So if I set it to this one, this means that both of them has to be there, but that will not happen. If I set it to this one, then the manager but here still you have the role, but you don't have a relation yet. I have already created right now a JavaScript policy. I have already showed how to create one for Keycloak. You can check that in the previous video. I have the link in the description. But let's go on and select it. It's only manager policy. Manager check, for example. Let's call it that way. As you see here, what it does is that it's going to get the user, it's going to get the user ID, it's going to get the attributes of the user. So we are going to have access on the person ID. We already added the person ID for Mark, and this was this attribute. So the person ID is already added. It's going to get the person ID for Mark, and then it's going to get the resource, and then from the resource it's going to get the manager ID attribute, and then it's going to check if the manager ID equals the person ID, and if so, the access will be granted. And then this way you can now grant access. So let's go back. But what we want to do is that, okay, your ID is equal to the manager ID, but maybe you are not in the manager role anymore. Maybe that was revoked from you in Keycloak without actually touching your data or something. And now you can create an aggregated policy, but you could also change the attribute name a little bit. For example, change it to owner ID, or I don't know, like manager is fine. I guess manager is also okay, but in my case, I want the manager to be also in a specific role or roles, perhaps. Like for example, manager role, or perhaps manager writer role, or manager assistant role, or delegated manager roles, like things like this, right? So what I want is that I want the manager check, this is JavaScript policy, and the manager role, and I want both of them under this policy to be always true. And then I'm just gonna say only manager, for example, and then I'm gonna come back to the permissions inside my create faculty course. Under the manager, instead of this one, I'm going to select only manager. So what will happen now is that I have an aggregated policy which everything must be true under it, and I have another policy which says super user. If I select this one, it says or. So basically now there is an or between these two, where this is inside a bracket with ands in it, right? So this only manager has an and logic inside it. All of the conditions should be met under it, or the user should have the role super user. So that's why I will select the affirmative here. And now let's go on and see what will happen if I run this. As you see, now it works because now the resource has the correct ID. Now if I come back here and then just copy this and change this to 5, for example, so like another manager, and now run it again. So as you see, the IDs don't match, then I cannot really create. So now as you see, I also have protected the resources based on somehow relations, and my relations are based on attributes. If now you want to make it more complicated, you definitely can do that. If, for example, let's say you want to now do the grade, right? So the grade has different owners. So the grade has a course, like the grade has an enrollment, the enrollment has a course, the course has a faculty. All of these IDs has to be available under the course attribute. So when you are adding the attributes, for example, you are going to add owners, where here you are going to add an array of owners, and therefore then you can have kind of like a path, or you can actually set up a path here. Yeah, let's now check my final thoughts. Let's check our final thoughts and see where should we actually use this whole environment. Well, that was it with this video. I think I did plant an idea in your mind how you can use the fine-grained authorization in .NET. And as you see, it's much simpler. I don't need to know about the roles. I just need to know what I'm going to do to this entity, and then I can do it. We saw actually how then you can do it with a relation to a specific resource. So for example, as we saw at a course for a faculty, but I don't recommend if you want to use it for very much complex case with relations. If you are going to check it or use it for attribute based, for example, checking simple attributes, like for example the IP address. I mean, they are also not simple. There are also a lot of discussions to handle these attributes, to add locations, to add times, and so on. This is perfect. It works perfectly fine. You can use perhaps even the Google Drive authorization system here without any relation-based authorization. The user can now even share the resources, because on each share you can just add the user ID to the owners of this resource, or maybe to the readers. Maybe you can add readers, writers, and so on under the resource with their ID, and then you can simply just check these attributes. You can come up with a lot of ideas. But if you have a very complex authorization which is going to check a path, and inside the path it's going to check on conditions, it may get complicated if you are not that much experienced with the authorization concept in the first place. Then in that case, I would suggest you look into other authorization systems, for example, like Zanzibar from Google. This is a definition which has some implementations from OpenFGA, from SpiceDB, and there are several other implementations too. You can go on, check them out. If you also like to have we have a video together about them, we can also do that. Let me know in the comment section. With all that being said, if you like this video, add a thumbs up. If you didn't, add a thumbs down. It's also fine. But comment it down below, like why you didn't like this video. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe. And until next time, have fun coding and cheers.